Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight for our 1507th lecture. I'm Matt Van Valkenburg, the Secretary of the Royal Asiatic Society of Korea, and on behalf of the officers and council, I welcome you to our lecture. By way of reminder, lecture content does not necessarily reflect the opinions or positions of the Royal Asiatic Society of Korea. So the RAS Korea expresses sincere thanks to our generous sponsor, the Asia Development Foundation, for their continuing support. We also especially thank Lee Jung-woo, who has made the use of this lecture space at Fast 5 possible, which is not here tonight. So we are joined tonight by Michael Hurt. I first came across his name in February 2003. I checked on my email last night. In the Seoul Selection newsletter. Regularly displayed his photos. So Michael is a photographer and professor living, shooting, and researching in Seoul. He received his doctorate from UC Berkeley's Department of Comparative Ethnic Studies. He also started Korea's first street fashion blog in 2006 and published the first English language book about Korean fashion in 2009. He researches youth, street fashion, and digital subcultures in Seoul, while lecturing on cultural theory and art history at the Korea National University of the Arts. He was the first researcher to focus on Korea's street fashion paper culture and has been shooting and publishing about it since 2007. His present research focuses on using the camera to access and document emergent digital subcultures in Korea, including the political economy of the pay model on Korean Instagram, Seoul's drag underground, and youth-centric LGBTQ movement in Korea. He also does cultural consulting on Korea for companies from Google to Pinterest, from PNG to Meta, and continues such research that coheres around his ethnographic photography. So after the lecture, there will be time for questions. Please welcome Michael Hurt.
Okay, sure. This is going to the Zoom, and this is, I think this is, okay, so. Okay, I'm going to apologize in advance for technical difficulties that are going to come up with autoplays of a couple of videos and things. But I did set up a nice speaker so that the audio will be kind of nice. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, so also what I want to say is I'd like this, I don't want you to only interact with me during the Q&A. I find that really disheartening as a lecturer. So if you have short questions or short comments where you want to, oh yeah, we have a quick question, not one of the fancy, stunty, long paragraph-like questions that can come in the Q&A, but just a short, what do you mean by that? That kind of thing. Please feel free to interrupt me, raise your hand, shout out, ask me to clarify. I'd rather everybody be clear on what's being said than just be kind of mystified by what I'm saying. Okay, thank you. Just like that. Okay. Sometimes I'm gonna sit down, but most of the time I'm gonna stand up. Okay. So today I'm covering a lot, and again I'm gonna apologize in advance. I'm gonna cover Jessi. You'll see Jessi. I'll get to that first. Screen feminism. Frankly, I'm not gonna explain that very deeply because I think most of the theory is very wonky, and you can read that in the paper of the same name that this whole thing is coming from. That's going to come out soon. So the screen feminism part I'll get to pretty much at the end. But the main thing I want to talk about is the artistic practice of Korean Instagram models and talk about the fact that what's happening on Korean Instagram amongst a certain class of people is very much artistic production. That's particular to Korean Instagram. We have a chat. I just want to make sure there's no major problems. Okay, I think everything's cool. So the main picture of this lecture, which is probably the raciest picture you've seen at a Royal Asiatic Society lecture, is not taken by me. So anyway, it's taken by one of the models I used to shoot until she kind of stopped coming to Seoul. She's in Daegu, who kind of really started becoming a photographer and shooting other models of them and with them. And this is a model. Actually, don't remember her name. I've only communicated with her once on Instagram, DM before. Okay, yeah. This has been on Instagram. This has been all over her Instagram. This is a publicly available photo. So feel free. But the real question here is, how can this kind of picture, how can this, and to answer the question, you can say that this can be feminist in that the model slash subject, her, has a certain kind of agency. And one kind of agency that I like to focus on is the agency that late feminist theorist Saba Mahmood showed us with her conversation about the hijab and Muslim women, and the question of whether one can be a member of a more conservative part of Islam, have to wear the hijab, but still be possessed of agency, or be able to say that you have agency in doing that. Okay, let me move this. I can't. Sorry, the Zoom was covering my screen. So this comes up in addressing the limitation of white Western feminism's tendency to only locate agency in terms of active, obvious resistance with guns or being in the street with picket signs, docility. She calls this docile agency. And this implies the malleability required of someone to be instructed in a particular skill of knowledge. So meaning it's less a sense of passivity and more of a struggle, effort, exertion, and achievement. This is her quote. Okay. There's too many things happening. I don't know how to mute them, but so Mahmood offers the example of a concert pianist who has endured years of training and pain and sacrifice. Oh. Where's the screen to mute people? I think the people are appearing here.
Like while Matt's doing that, how far behind, how long did it take Instagram to catch on in Korea? Was there a lag behind the US?
There was a lag. I think it was, so like the thing I'll say is it was 2014. That's when it really hit.
In Korea?
Yeah, hit Korea. I mean, there were people using Instagram. There was also Hipstagram or Hipster. There was another Hipstamatic that were kind of at the beginning of Instagram, but I think once it locked in the West, specifically the US, and it grew to a certain level, it was 2014 where it was really, I started having to DM with people. I started having to have my Instagram, which I'll talk about in a minute. I had to be a practitioner and have the Instagram, and I could only communicate, which still is the dominant form of communication today. So on the Mahmood thing, basically Mahmood says, you can participate in technically repressive, oppressive, pain-causing kind of practice, like a concert pianist who, in what's the movie with the drummer who gets abused by the teacher? Whiplash. So you can be abused, you can willingly accept the abuse, and then, develop the skills to artistically express back in the other direction. So you can actually be in a state of not complete freedom yet, still learn to have the tools to stage a rebellion later. I'm going to talk about this. Okay, so in terms of the picture that's up here, Specifically, what the photographer said is that she looks like she is obeying, like a slave. But I wanted to show that she takes pleasure in this type of sexual act, since this is her 취향. This is just her particular taste, her particular style of doing things. It's what she likes to do. She chooses to submit, and that's her sexual choice. And I wanted to aesthetically distinguish this from pornography by choosing a pastel color scheme, and the Bebe nickname points to her 애교. Her, what did that one paper call it? 애교? No, like the winsomeness. I think that's what it was called. Yeah, I guess gendered winsomeness. The Bebe nickname points to that 애교, winsomeness, and making herself sexually subservient, which is her choice of the way to be with her chosen man. So she's being subservient, but again, she's the one choosing. She's enabling everything. So that's, in this way, this is a very agentic kind of picture. And if you want to get into the weeds of this, it was a woman photographer who took pictures of her friend model, who's also a woman. So make sense of that how you want to. Okay, so I've been looking at how in K-pop, there's been this, certain people have been leading this conversation on sex, gender, media, and power. And they don't seem very docile. But again, they've put in the work, they've learned to speak the language of, for example, K-pop, which has been long criticized as being sexist or objectifying to women. The person I wanted to put up here first is Jessi. And I don't think this is gonna really work. Can we turn the lights off for a minute? You don't need to look at me. So what I'm gonna do is play about half the video. How many of you have seen this video? More than one person has seen this video, surely. Okay. Okay. That's perfect. Okay.
I'm so naughty, 우리 전문가 너 돌파 Using nobody with nobody 나 무대 위에서 간도가 겁나 매운 맛으로 잘 나가는 맛집 차렸네 My kimchi so delicious need a Michelin that shorty good in the mouth walk out cook which is my boy touch your toes then drop it low tree pull that boat go take it out
Okay, I don't think I can pause here, but do you see what she's doing? There's subtext here, right? Anybody catch it? She's a cold-blooded hoe, but her name is Ho. She is literally a hoe, which is funny, which is how you can get that onto Korean television. You can't say this is some kind of inappropriate language when it's literally her name. Her name is Jessi Ho, Jessica Ho. So there's that, but how is this different from Girls' Generation, that first generation kind of K-pop, original K-pop dance that we all know? How is this different from the Wonder Girls or Girls' Generation in terms of the dancing styles and what's being presented? Is there any different? There's what?
Certainly not as chaste.
It's not as chaste, right? It's very
groin work.
groin work. I mean, she literally says, and this is what I point out. What I want to point out is she said her kimchi is so delicious it needs a Michelin star, which is, the thing is, in the YouTube video, it actually says, in the English translation, it says, my pussy is so delicious it needs a Michelin. So it's clear you don't have to read very much to see what kimchi symbolizes here, right? So yeah, there's that. So she's leading a social conversation, which actually with a women's Street Fighter is that I keep reversing that. Has anybody seen the Woman Street Fighter?
Street woman.
Street Woman Fighter. Okay, I always get that confused. Right.
It's not about actual prostitutes.
Yeah. So you had like dance crews, K-pop dance crews, compete for the right to be in the official video of Jessi's. So, and this is on Korean national television, not KBS, but it's on cable. It's on official TV. Cold-blooded hoe. My kimchi is so delicious, touching her crotch. There's a little bit of semiotic, symbolic cover she's doing. And there is, I could have a, anyway, I gotta move on, move the slide. Okay.
Lights, camera, action. I see you looking at my PIC. Zoom out, okay? Zoom in, zoom out, okay? Zoom in, zoom out, okay? Baby, I'm feeling like $1,000,000, yeah. Must be the $1,000,000, yeah. Oh, you got a peachy now. Selfie tracker, come to peachy now. Always talking shit, don't you like that? Don't you mind? I'm more into that. Yeah, it's like that. Hey, hey, pretty little thing. Baby, I say I'm right back. Ooh, them two sides to the dick will be a side. I can put it in my mind. Lights, camera, action, baby. I see you looking at my PIC.
Okay, I'm trying to get this quiet so I can talk. My Vietnamese Bluetooth speaker is really worth the money. I think it was pretty good. Anyway, she's clearly leading a social conversation. You can hear her talking about, I mean, I see you looking at my pic, my PIC, right? Thank you, cook it, thank you. I mean, there's naughty subtext here. So she's like, look at my picture, cook it, thank you. Sorry, that's what she's talking about. You can look at my picture and jack off to it if you want. I don't care. I think that's kind of the wordplay happening. But also she's talking about, we all live for pictures, we all live to get attention, this kind of thing. So it's a very different kind of conversation than cutesy, tell me, that generation is definitely over. Jessi is definitely, she's well-liked. She's less controversial than you would think somebody like that would be. Yeah, so, you know, that theme is it's anthemic, and it appears on Instagram Reels constantly. I mean, you can't escape that. You couldn't escape that song. But I show you all this just to show from the top down end of things, the kind of conversation being had about gender, media, sex, and power. And this is very much a conversation people were not supposed to have. But a lot of people might critically say, well, Jessi's kind of an exception, and she is, because she's not a Korean, she's an American. I think being a Korean American woman, and she's always referencing that with her drops of English and whatnot, she clearly has privilege as an outsider. Anyway, I'll move on. I gotta get these slides going. Okay, so this is actually the model who I worked with and started to realize that something is going on in terms of artistic production on Instagram, something a little bit different than just, you know, showing skin for attention. She's actually supposed to be here. She's caught in traffic. So she's wanted to listen to the lecture. So she'll be here probably for Q&A. So that should be interesting if and when she gets here. We'll figure that out when she gets here. But when I talk about docile agency, Mahmoud's concept of docile agency in my paper, I realized I didn't want to use, some people dislike the term docile, even though it wasn't my term, it's a well-established term in the feminist literature. So I wanted to make a new term. I wanted to call what she's talking about, learning the language of the genre, getting the tools to produce back in another direction, as complaisant agency, sort of playing along, playing the game, and then later you can flip it. I'll make this slide short. But before I move on very much with this, I want to talk about methodology. And to do that, I have to kind of introduce my photographic practice. So I'm going to go through, this is going to be kind of a herky-jerky transition, but here we go. So photographically, I started out, especially in Korea in 2002, doing kind of pure street fashion. A lot of people called my street photography a waste of time. Technically, that was true because I was supposed to be doing my dissertation and I wasn't doing it. I didn't finish my dissertation from 2002 when I was supposed to finish maybe in the next year. I didn't finish until 2014. Anyway, my mom had a lot to say about that. But in any case, I began to take photography more seriously along the road to being an academic. And that photography influenced my methodology and direction. And even what I realized later is even my documentary photography, street photography back in 2002 was deeply ethnographic, meaning kind of anthropological. So it was kind of a study of people. But I realized it was just a piece of the longest possible period of field work that any person really does around their dissertation. So I basically spent 12 years doing visual field work. I like to think of it that way. But the interesting thing about that field work was it was conducted open-endedly without a crystal clear question in mind. So I was doing this open-ended kind of exploring what my point was. Didn't really know. But what I do know is that in the work, I've long been interested in consumption, identity, and consumption as identity. And this started by simply observing people in the streets of Seoul. So my interest in ethnographic photography, kind of anthropological people photography, has remained, I think, a constant through my work, even from when I wasn't doing technically fashion work. And I had an increasing interest in how women were busy being women. And I was documenting moments of what Judith Butler calls gender performativity. So I wanted to do that, but it's hard to catch. It's kind of creepy to walk around taking pictures of people, especially women, to do gender performativity. So I started posing people and taking portraits and actually using models later. And yes, actually, Sumin is here. Hello. So her picture will come up several times in the presentation. So when you see a picture and it's kind of weird, you can look back at her and kind of make her feel uncomfortable. Okay. So this interest dominated the themes of what was quickly becoming street fashion photography for me, especially as I changed over from film to digital in 2006, which allowed me to start taking random street pics with no outlay of money. And it's changed over to portraits. Pretty soon, I decided to take the ethnography part more seriously and be less lazy and stop drive-by shooting people. And frankly, do it in a way that can be seen as less creepy. By April 2013, random street fashion pictures, random pictures of people became concretely illegal. So it became part of a special act on sexual crimes with photography. So in the interest of not going to jail, I changed my methodology. So it became fully ethnographic, and I'm lagging behind in the slides here. So pretty soon, both my photographic and ethnographic interaction techniques were getting better and starting to gel. And by 2010, I'd fallen into a groove, especially when I got to Seoul Fashion Week. And by this time, I developed, what does that say? Okay, I don't need to worry about that. So by this time, I'm doing what I now call photo-sartorial elicitation. And this photo-sartorial, this sounds, anyway, elicitation techniques are popular in anthropology. So something called photo elicitation is a technique where you take a picture, show it to UCLA or whoever your informant is, and say, what does this picture make you feel when you look at yourself in the picture? And then you elicit social information, sort of like an interview. An interview is a kind of elicitation technique as well. But I use photo-sartorial elicitation to talk about eliciting social data by focusing our interaction around clothing. This is not different really from how an interview is used by social investigators, because an interview is a structured, unnatural social interaction that is designed to elicit data from the subject. Mine is, so in the way I consider the street photography individual sessions as kind of elicitation interview sessions. Yeah. Oh, there's just a leftover, it's gonna come in the next slide. So I started using photo-sartorial elicitation. So this is a Korean model who's wearing a Vietnamese áo dài. And I did the same in Vietnam. I took hanbok to Vietnam and had Vietnamese models wear them, and I kind of interviewed them and asked them, how does this make you feel? But of course, the idea was that national dress is supposed to carry social information, right? So if you take national dress design, hanbok makes people feel a certain way. If you put a hanbok on another national body, shouldn't it convey some kind of social information? Shouldn't they start posing a certain way? Maybe start becoming that winsome, Korean winsomeness should travel through the hanbok to other people. áo dài, yeah. I think it's just spelled with the D, but pronounced with the Z. Yeah. So continuing that a little bit. So I also had the idea of putting hanbok on different raced bodies. And actually, John Dunbar, you might remember, this elicited a certain negative response. There were some commenters who were like, how dare you, insult the hanbok by putting this on this black woman, and it was pretty negative. Anyway,
It's on Instagram.
this went on to the Korea Times. There was an article.
So there were comments on Instagram.
Yeah. Yeah, which of course one would expect. Sorry, John. But this dress looks proper on this person with this face, right? I think it's interesting because this hanbok actually is made with this is a Japanese fabric made by a modern hanbok designer. But when it put on her, everybody said, oh, wow, that African design is so awesome. But it's not an African design. It's interesting how people take that when you remix that. So methodologically speaking, I had to become an influencer for access. I noticed the more Instagram, the bigger my following got, the better my pictures got in my feed, the easier it was to talk to DM people like Sumin and say, hey, do you think we might do a photo shoot? And as my follower count gets higher and my feed gets better, people generally tend to respond positively. Okay, so what I'd like to point out here is that my photography, am I walking off should I stay here? Okay, I should probably stay here, but so my photography is a key of access, and it's a reason to interact with these people. So if I were just a normal fuddy-duddy professorly type and I said, hey, random person on Instagram, I'd like to sit down and interview over coffee. The question, if I said to Sumin, I want to sit down and interview over coffee about all these ideas that I have, the question would be, why? What do I get out of that? But if I'm interacting as a member of the field, I can say, I can give you a really awesome picture to help you boost your Instagram feed, get more followers, likes, things like that. So I have to basically give them a deliverable. So real quick, this picture is at a Vietnamese fashion design runway show or graduation show. And I got access to actually Vietnamese Fashion Week by having shot at Seoul Fashion Week, having shot in Korea, and having a certain body of work. I got into the event quite easily. So I'm able to move around in these areas quite easily with my bukae. Has anyone heard of the term bukae? Yes. Bukae. So my bu character, my sub character, my alter ego. So this is kind of another hard gear shift. My Soul Street Studios identity is kind of my professional bukae that helps me interact with, honestly, a lot of other Instagram models bukae in Korea.
Is that a Korean word or is it
a Korean word? So bu character, like sub character. So it's the first portmanteau of bu character. Yeah, so bukae, sub character, alter ego. So I argue that this kind of identity diffraction across in Korea, a lot of young people have not just one or two, but 3, 4, 5, 6 Instagrams. 수민, Instagram 계정 몇 개 있나요? 5, okay, cool. You have many bukae. My argument is that, especially when interacting with a lot of people like this, or in their Instagram, this gives a sort of semiotic, plausible deniability. So when you do crazy stuff, you show skin, you put on makeup, you put on a weird gas filter mask, show some skin, get into naughty poses. You can say, this is, and I think this is true in Korea, this is art. If it's art, I think Korean people often people get away with a lot. You've seen the naked young women statues at the Chungmun, the front gate of many women's universities. The women are often doing things like this, looking into the future, but they're naked. Yeah, I think you can be naked as long as it's art in Korea. I think Koreans have a healthy, high regard for art. As long as it's art, if you have an artistic bukae, you can get away with a lot. And I think this is a bit different from a Finsta. Anybody know Finsta? Fake Instagram? Kind of an alternate Instagram that's not you, that a lot of people use to do things, but it's kind of like you don't identify yourself, it's a secret Instagram, which, you know, people do things with online. But I think a bukae is a little bit different because I actually forgot who this person is, but this model isn't necessarily in her Instagram hiding her identity. It's often obfuscated by lots of makeup, by doing things outside of the character of this person, you know, in terms of what people, her friends may know. But it's not necessarily a top secret Instagram. I think that's what's different from a Finsta. And also, my bukae status as a photographer and a person friendly to queer activism helps get me placed front and center and allows me, like for example, a drag show. This is a popular drag performer. Otherwise, it can be sensitive to take pictures with a big flash. Who's this guy in the front row flashing this drag performer and doing who knows what with the pictures? So that's how my bukae accesses other bukaes. So I'm starting to get into, I started noticing, especially about 2 years ago, people who seem to be engaged in what I'd call artistic production, and doing things that are not usually what you see people doing to get attention on Instagram, which is bikinis showing, laying what they call thirst traps, just exposing skin, but making statements. So this is Chic Cookie, one of my models who began photographing her own models and applying her photography and graphic design skills to make her own art. And that's actually what impressed me most about Sumin a couple years ago at this point. Really good graphic design skills. And by the way, Chic Cookie Art is the person who took the picture again, that, the lead picture of this presentation. So this is actually Sumin's picture with nice digital effects. And the title was called E-Solitude. And I think, okay, here's the quote. Sumin says, women can't beat men by force alone. So I think it's powerful when you use your brain. Here, I can feel something powerful from a weak girl in a school uniform. So-called weak girl in a school uniform. And this girl conveys meaningful things. You know the Sailor Moon standard school uniform, right? It appears a lot in Korean Instagram, especially young women who want to be cute, sexy, winsome, what have you, and get lots of likes and whatnot. So wearing a Sailor Moon or any kind of school girl uniform is a pretty common thing that people do. But Sumin did it in a different kind of way. Okay, so now I'm going to shift gears once again and talk about the beginnings of digital art practice, especially in Korea, related to the convergence of the smartphone, well, the phone, or a hand computer, really, a camera, GPS coordination, the ability to figure out geolocation. This is actually from a game called Shoot Me If You Can. So this was kind of an art experiment conducted by, I forget there's a digital museum over in Myeongdong. And they had people with their Korean cell phone enabled phone, their camera enabled phones. The idea was you had to go and shoot the other team and, evade being shot. And it's supposedly, someone wrote actually Larissa Hjorth, a great writer and media theorist, wrote a whole article on this in 2008. And this amazing, surprising artistic practice. But by today's standards, it's pretty stupid, kind of, right? This is not cutting edge. This is just like, you have a cell phone, you took my picture. Who cares? I mean, we do this, this is just part of our lives now. But in 2008, this was like, wow, whiz bang, amazing, radical. Not to beat up on Larissa Hjorth, but this was an interesting point of view she had. She said in her article on locative media, one of the dominant features of mobile media is how it further fetishizes the analog by way of its obsession with modes of realism. Okay. That kind of applies to this game. Camera phone practices, quote, camera phone practices as an extension of photography and snapshots are about performing normalcy. However, because of the distributive and networked logic of mobile phones, one is now left to contextualize these banal shots and render them newsworthy and relevant to the receiver. That all seemed to be relevant and interesting at this point, more than a decade ago. But I want to talk about how digital art practice looks today and kind of prove the point that this is actually artistic production. Y'all know who Cindy Sherman is? Cindy Sherman, okay, so I'm gonna quickly talk about the fact that Cindy Sherman, she did this series of portraits, kind of mostly self-portraits. She's called the mother of the selfie, the inventor of the selfie, because she did these self-portraits of her playing social roles, especially as a woman, in the 60s and 70s. Basically, a bunch of pictures of her doing what she called film stills, like she was a still photographer for a film. And she became quite famous for this, displayed in MoMA, faded everywhere. So she's quite well known. in terms of this kind of conversation she's having about gender, screens, film, things like that. So this is Cindy Sherman performing a mode of gender in black and white on film in like the late 60s. And this is Sumin doing something to me that looked very, I said, I had a conversation with Sumin. I said, I gave her a book of Cindy Sherman. I said, you're doing Cindy Sherman. Have you heard of this person? We had this long conversation. And I keep seeing Cindy Sherman's kind of production all over Korean Instagram. So this is another model I work with, Coco Nana. If you want to go to her Instagram, feel free. Sorry, it's so small. But this, so I think Cindy Sherman was having a conversation about domestic violence, abuse, you know, that sort of thing. I don't know if that's the conversation Coco Nana was having or is having, but this is a popular kind of thing amongst the artistic sort in Korean Instagram. In terms of performing normalcy, to quote Hjorth again, this is the Cindy Sherman. This is an Instagrammer I don't know, but there was a big trend of kind of home, I forget the hashtag, kind of a home core, I forget the term, basically doing really domestic-y things, young girls posing in front of laundry machines, in fact, going inside laundry machines, posing, being very kind of domestic, kind of this fetishization of home spaces, especially in a culture where you don't get to have those home spaces at a young age to yourself. This performance of normalcy was interesting to see. And Cindy Sherman had been doing the same thing. So I said to myself, if Cindy Sherman's doing it and she was called an artist, you know, finish that sentence. You all know Nikki S. Lee, maybe she became infamous. She couldn't do this work today, but she went down to the South, deep South, and lived amongst KKK members for a few weeks. And then she posed with them as them. She also did the same thing with like hip hop subcultures in Brooklyn. Even she did a thing with Latina gangs, and she posed as a Latina woman. She colored her skin. Nowadays, that'd be a little controversial, but anyway, she was a very successful artist. Now she's back in Korea, not really practicing art anymore, but I think teaching or something. In any case, it occurred to me that Sumin is doing very similar things. And then we get to the most famous digital artist, Baek Nam-jun, right? Who he's famous for the TVs. In fact, a lot of people don't remember why he's really famous. But the TVs and screens and that sort of thing. He's kind of famous for having us look at things in a meta way. Let's step outside the text. Here is Coco Nana doing meta engagement with this old kind of analog tool, which is a popular thing that youngsters are into, analog and retro. How are we doing on time? I'm in slide 27 of 35, so we're good, I think. Okay, so another herky-jerky gear shift here. So I want to talk about fourth generation K-pop. I can't take full credit for this. A woman named Ashley Edwards hit me to the fact that fourth generation K-pop was kind of connecting with what you could talk about as fourth generation feminism, fourth wave feminism. And what people talk about is self-producing K-pop artists now. So you no longer have the idea of Girls' Generation or Wonder Girls produced by a man who basically ape a man's direction and are just puppets of a production. But nowadays, much more, the performers themselves are making the texts, performing it. And because of this, the texts I've argued have become obviously more feminist, however you want to define that. They're different from what they were before. Okay.
So can I throw in a question in? Are you seeing any signs that the K-pop school, what do you call it, the factory system that's tailing off, that the number of auditions and people joining those factories is decreasing, and this is increasing, or are they both existing side by side in a continuum?
On the production side of things, I don't know. I don't want to say anything about that because there are people who would know, who'd be able to answer that question, but I'm not that person. But I do see more what is called now self-producing idols. I didn't make that term, but self-producing idols is what these people tend to be called more. So I want to show you this video, G Idol. Has anyone heard of them?
Why you did the boss now? Cause you feel so rude. Think outside the box, then you like it. Hello, my name is Happy Happy Yo. I'm telling the moon is sexy, sexy yo.
I think this one is worth watching in its entirety. So in this part, I want to point out that she isn't dancing or moving her body for us. The only part where she actually dances is for the people in the text to make the point about the gaze that she's making here. In fact, there's not very much dancing in these recent spate of videos. A little bit, but it's not very dance centric.
Now I draw a line.
So the part with the paper shredding of the, do we know who that's referencing? Right, so she's having a conversation about art.
Who's that referencing? I missed that.
Banksy, who he infamously sold one of his pieces to this, and then secretly enclosed a paper shredder, a mini paper shredder, and as soon as it was sold, it was shredded, and then it became more valuable, right? Because of the act of what that made that extra special. So I have this note about from the paper. This may be interesting and may be wonky. So in this music video, Soyeon notably only puts herself on display, or actually dances in the video, for the camera and the audience's gaze in the space of metatextual commentary in which she's playing roles as dance modeling tropes within the text. As Marilyn Monroe in Infamous Media Moments, as a burlesque dancer on a stage, within a stage, as herself as a paparazzified subject within a tabloid newspaper, as a movie star in a glass case at an auction, as a dancing girl in an 1830s phantascope. That was kind of a really specific reference, which I thought was unusual to see in the K-pop video. As Jessica Rabbit, as herself, perhaps in an Instagram live, and finally as an art object on display that finally becomes the Banksy's best trick that he pulled. So she's definitely setting herself up as a center of a lot of media modes of conversation. And this is not just you don't have to do all this stuff to make a K-pop video. You just look pretty, you do the dances. This is way over the top in terms of what it needs to be popular. Okay. Now, to talk about, to finish up the video portion of the program, I've got to talk about BB. Has anyone heard of BB? Because BB is the one who's made the most trouble and has got the most caught. The gun pointed at her, said, "You're a feminist." And she says, "No, I'm not a feminist. No, that's not what, there's no message to this." So anyway, you can judge for yourself. Is this a feminist text? That's the question. You'll see what I mean. Anyone seen this video? So it's kind of starts off a little iffy. This is was it last year? 2 years ago? 2 years ago?
It might be pretty, it might be beautiful, it might be great. This might be right, this might be just this, but
So she kills all the men, cuts off their heads, men as pigs, the whole thing. But when she was called out by some people online saying, "Aren't you a feminist? Admit it." She's like, no, I'm not a feminist. There's nothing to see here. There's no subtext at all. In fact, I'm just a Kill Bill fan. That's the only thing going on. So I think she kind of used this as cover, and people, I think, unless you're caught red-handed, and I think she was subtextually, she's able to wiggle out of it because she's like, I didn't actually overtly say I was a feminist. I didn't use the F word about myself. So she's, I don't know, after looking at this video, I kind of feel like there's a feminist subtext that can be read here in some way. Something, maybe, but again, that's the artist cover, subtext is cover. She uses the shield pretty well. And she kind of got away with it because she said, I'm not a feminist. She actually said, I'm not a feminist. Therefore, that's the fact. She disavowed herself of that ideology, which is seen as almost like a terrorist ideology in Korea these days. Anyway, that's the conversation that's being had from certain people from the top down. So that conversation's being had, and some people in that group of people I call artists, and sometimes describe themselves as artists. But generally, when I ask folks that, I didn't take this picture, this is another Instagrammer that I've worked with, and she kind of gets into the blood, and clearly in this case, she actually, these are nice body parts. She bought these. They're pretty realistic. Covered herself. Fake blood is pretty popular and easy to buy on Naver now. And especially because it's Halloween. So what you see during Halloween is people doing this kind of stuff under the cover of, oh, it's just Halloween and hard. I'm just doing kind of like, you know, certain kinds of makeup art. This is demonstrating my skill, but she sawed her man into pieces. And this is, she referenced Joto, which is another BB thing where BB cuts up her boyfriend and puts him into the trunk. So is there a conversation that's being had? I think there are some people who are speaking back to the people on top. There's a back and forth that's being had. So I think there's a resonance between the culture industry producers on the big screen and similar production on the many small screens of social media across Korea. It's interesting when you have production happening on both ends that way. And my photography has been able to let me bump into these people. So this is another person I've worked with named Rumi, who I know, Sumin knows. A lot of people know. She doesn't have the biggest following on Instagram. She doesn't have a K, I don't believe, behind her name. But of the people who do follow her, most of them are very artistic, kind of super special people. So what statement is being made here? I think the interesting thing to note here, there's a lot of people who like to make analog retro pictures, and they're playing, and then where the hell did they get this phone? You had to make a special effort to get this phone to make this picture. If you're gonna, so the idea I think is, if you're gonna be in your underwear, you might as well be doing something interesting rather than just being your underwear on Instagram. So another one from Rumi. And there was a time around, I think this is maybe 3 years ago, I had a few models who wanted to do portraits, concepts with this muzzle. So this was actually a pretty semi-popular kind of trend in Instagram, I noticed. So back to Cindy Sherman, you don't have to do all that stuff to just take a pretty picture of yourself or to look cute or sexy or what have you on Instagram. And there's definitely this pattern of the bruising, the cuts, the band-aids, that kind of stuff. You see that happening not uncommonly. So I think we can all agree that there's something going on here. There's some digital art production going on here. I think it's specific to Korea, whether you call it Korean feminism, womanism, girl positivity, what have you. I am calling this a screen feminism or womanism, screen feminism that's deeply digital and as personal as old school feminism was analog. So digital, the screen feminism of Korea now is as deeply digital as Western feminism was analog and old. And in the way that Western feminism was analog and tended to manifest as overtly political. I think we think of feminism as burning bras, even though that really wasn't a thing. Picket signs, demonstrations, public demonstrations, marches, political action. I think the mode of feminism in Korea may be, since you can't be overtly feminist, maybe this kind of screen feminism where you can engage in possibly feminist subtextual production, but you won't be pinned down for it or caught or socially pilloried for it. So to reference Marshall McLuhan, the medium is the message. I think in terms of a Korean feminism, a Korean feminist movement, you might not necessarily see it manifest as we want our rights and go out into the streets and do that like in a Western feminism, but it's going to maybe manifest in a different subtextual way. I think BB is engaging in it. I mean, you construct semiotic kind of points where you can dodge the criticism, and you cut off men's heads, and you wink wink. Everybody who watches the video, especially other like-minded women, are going to be like, I see what you're saying, I'm into it. Right.
You know, she in Chinese character, what it means? There's a shin,
Shin, yeah.
kind of gallbladder.
Gallbladder?
Yeah. 와신 상담 is a 사자성어 who is Maxim, something like that.
Yeah.
We can accommodate the kind of bitterness. Gallbladder, yeah.
So with that, that kind of gall, as it were. So the English, after killing you, it'll be very futile. What did I get? I'm confused. Yeah. So I think in this statement, she's holding a gun too. So maybe we can ask Sumin about that during the Q&A. 이거 무슨 뜻인지. Yeah. So we can ask that question during the Q&A. So I'm just gonna finish up. Okay, so I'm gonna end with the first picture set that Sumin and I did. So this is when she showed up to do our first, we talked on Instagram, and she was like, I'm gonna bring a schoolgirl uniform. And when the model brings a schoolgirl uniform, there are certain things that you tend to end up doing that tends to be tropey. It tends to be like, I'm cute, I'm sexy. But in terms of my photographic tendencies and what she was trying to do, it didn't go in that direction. And actually, the interesting thing here was the fact that often people come onto the Instagram and are like, they make their points known. And one person said, why do you like, kind of suggest that the subjugation of women is something good to look at? Why is this sexy? And then actually, when Sumin and I talked about it, the concept, because I was taking the picture, and the concept was kind of, okay, before I tell you, does anyone want to take a guess at what Sumin is trying to say here? There's no right or wrong answer, although there is, sorry. But I mean, what do you see in this picture? I think a lot of people see subjugation, violence against women, that kind of thing. But actually, the concept that Sumin was saying, that she is like a tough girl and she just got into a fight and she beat the shit out of the other person. And this is her post-fight kind of bragging picture. So I don't know. That's what we tried to say, but all subtextual messages don't get picked up in the way they're intended. Okay. And that's the end of our show. How do we end? Do you have any time left in the? Okay, we ended a little we got a little bit extra. So should we just go right into the Q&A? I'm not sure if I'm still displaying on the Zoom. Okay, stop screen share. Okay, I'll try to keep myself in the frame then. So move right into Q&A. So let's just do that. Q&A. Any questions, comments? I guess the first one we should probably start with is the picture with the shin of the gall bile.
for idioms is very.
A name that was 4-character Chinese idiom that had a sound.
Yeah.
Why they put it there, you know. I think this is
Don't you take questions from the Zoom?
Okay. Let me go to that slide and then hit play. Is that displaying? 수민, 혹시 이거 설명 좀 해줄 수 있나요? Please do. Can you come here maybe? I'll give you the mic.
My question is very self-destructive and a lot of, out there great English. Why is it sometimes a good, idiom, Korean, four-letter, right? It's very contradictory.
와신상담 mean is like revenge, do anything for the revenge.
In a sense, right, correct, but in another sense, normally we suffer a lot, but I know I'm ready to accommodate it. Why is it sometimes? Sometimes, we are given a hard time on the, of course, it's a revenge, but there's a negative side of it. There are 2 points. The other side is why is it sometimes? I'm suffering a lot, okay, but I know how to accommodate. I need a lot of patience.
Yeah.
It's a positive.
You can use like that, but I use this because you, especially because of the revenge.
That I think that that's misleading. Because these days young people, they don't care about the Chinese characters. They don't know what that means. But that's there's too one-sided.
Okay, but I think we should move on because you're not really in a position to contradict her interpretation of it, so.
Okay.
let's try to be respectful to people.
So at the 좀 결국적으로, so can you just explain what you meant by that?
I meant about like 와신상담 mean is like
Yeah, in a sense you don't lie, but
Yeah.
not always.
do anything about for the revenge. So mine means about like you say you do anything, you do bad thing about me, but I will be leave. 그래서 계속 이렇게 살아간다.
I'm gonna live bravely in a way.
I will live bravely because I want to be revenge you. Yeah, when I go on top, that is the meaning. And this I want to make the pictures like a poster. And 화양 영화 poster. I want to make like that. So I use the Chinese 사자성어 and I find it, and this 사자성어 is the best meaning that I can find.
So can I have her continue and maybe do another question, because I think she's more interested than me at this point. 또 다른 질문, yeah, I think they're going to ask you some questions.
Ask a question. Do you notice any difference between Western Insta and Korean Insta? 서양 인스타와 한국 인스타는 어떤 차이인지.
What in the models or the pictures or
What you see?
the Korean Insta is really in the trend. 트렌드에 엄청 강하고 서양 인스타는 they are really into it in their mind, in their only their self. So except influencer, 그냥 일반 사람들을 봤을 때는 서양 사람들 인스타는 조금 색감이 너무 강하고 사진마다 인스타에 사진마다의 개성이 너무 강해서 통일감이 좀 없다라는 느낌이 있고요. 우리나라 모델들은 조금 옷 사진을 올리는 계정이라면 패션 계정 같은 느낌이 있고, 아니면 셀카를 올리시는 분이라면 이 사람이 예쁜 자신의 얼굴을 자랑하고 싶은 계정이다 같은 느낌이 확실하게 드는 느낌이 있어요. 트렌드에도 강하고, 아니면은 좀 유명해지고 싶어하는 그런 걸 잘 이용하는 편이어서.
요즘에 어떤 트렌드?
We might want to also give Michael a minute to translate things for the non-Korean speaking members.
Okay, I haven't been really paying, like noting things.
Moving on.
Moving on, I'll try to keep track.
In Korean,
Yeah, just
in models, a lot of 일반 model, we call them 일반 model, like theirs are just normal people, but they turn to the model because the pay free
Pay model?
no
Pay.
non-pay free
Non-pay, like,
사모자국
so the so
무페이 작업이 많아서
무pay, so basically there's this concept called the 일반인 model, like a normal person model, but yeah, so there's a lot of these models. It's kind of a phenomenon that you don't see really in the West. Like you might see people who are cute, who might show skin, but if you ask them, are you a model? They'll be like, no. Whereas in Korea, it's more like, yeah, I'm an 일반인 model. There's a category for those people. There's lots of people engaging in formal modeling with high level of skills. So professional level models who are not technically models.
The picture's quality is really go high. So 많이 올라가 편인 것 같아요.
Other questions? I don't want to put, yes, please.
In that other picture, the revenge of Chinese characters, one of the commenters was basically only just talking about that the ice was funny. And to me, it must be very frustrating when you try to make an argument with this kind of nonsensical responses. I'm just curious how that feels for the artist.
One more time, I didn't catch the first part.
In the
One with the Chinese character, not this one.
No,
with
the Chinese
other
character.
one. That one, no. That
this
one.
one, yeah. There's a comment there.
Lab Rice.
Yes, in the middle one. He's just talking about the way the ice. And I'm just thinking, it must be very. So I think it must be very frustrating for the artist.
Which one?
Trying to make a point.
Lab Rice, your eyes are so
Ah.
beautiful, but why here is looking very, very strange. That one.
Yes.
그래, 성희롱
So I just think
얘기하는
it must be very frustrating for the artist to get this kind of message.
예, 그런 거 엄청 많죠.
Yeah,
이런
there's a lot of people, and yeah, when I'm doing the pictures or photographer or the model, when I'm doing the model, a lot of, can I say like this? Because I can see a lot of pictures in a word every morning, and I can hear a lot of bad words in a lot of words, but it's okay because I know that and I upload it because I'm using that. I'm using that mind because someone gonna watch my pictures because of the sexy point, but it is an important point, I think, because they need to click my pictures any reason, but when they click my pictures and then someone's gonna read my comment and someone's gonna just, oh, it's sexy, whoa, it's gonna be separated, but someone or one or two gonna read my comments and they will gonna read my art. That is an important point, I think. So someone's just think I'm just sexy or whoa, today's nice, this is it, it's okay. So I'm using that sexy point, or I like using the point.
Laying what I call logic bombs. So you're laying traps. And you bring them in with the idea that this is just a meaningless, sexy thing, and then actually there's something more.
After killing you, I will very critical what is you a nihilist. After killing you, I will be very critical. It's poetic, very poetic, philosophical. You are kind of a nihilist, or you are?
I think it's pretty self-explanatory.
Maybe. Sorry, it's the Hamlet question. I'm sorry.
I hate to interrupt, we only got 5 minutes left to vacate the room.
Oh,
So I'm going to suggest that usually we join together and have beer and chicken afterwards. And if you two would be willing to join us, we'd be very happy.